Hi everyone, I'm Gavin Chua with my teammate Chua. Today we'll be having our Botanic Gardens oral presentation. So this is the allocated sustainability criteria. For my criterion, it will be emissions and waste. My general question is, how sustainable is the way the Botanic Gardens deal with the emissions and waste?
And the criterion I'll be looking at is flora and fauna, with the general question being to what extent is biodiversity sustainable across the botanic gardens?
So my criterion, emission and waste, how sustainable is the way the Botanic Gardens deal with emissions and waste? First, we'll be looking at the data collection and sources. The primary data collection techniques for this will be the field observations as we went to the Botanic Gardens site itself. During this visit to the Botanic Gardens, we had interviews with our field guide who gave us a great many information about the site itself. Next will be our secondary data sources from government statistics, company websites, market research reports, and early research done. So how sustainable is the way the Botanic Garden deal with emissions and waste? The first particular question is the level of carbon emissions in the Botanic Gardens. The Botanic Garden has an average visitor count of 4.5 million visitors annually, which roughly translates to 12,000 a day. Coupled with their private transportation, this is a lot of CO2 produced by the garden itself due to this high traffic flow. Next is the average CO2 output per F&B establishment. Secondary data sources show that the average F&B produces about 600 metric tons of CO2 a year. With 10 restaurants inside the Botanic Gardens itself, this amounts to 6,000 metric tons. Now, 6,000 metric tons is a lot of CO2 for the Botanic Gardens as compared to other parks in Singapore where they have lesser or no cafes at all. As such, this particular question receives a mean score of 4, unsatisfactory, due to the high traffic flow and the presence of many F&B establishments. Next, we'll be looking at the amount of hard waste produced by Botanic Gardens. So we observe there are presence of hard waste on site with general litter along the paths and the forested areas. However, it's not that many as we anticipated. There's also the quantity of F&B establishments on site. However, in these cafes itself, not many hard waste also is observed. As such, this receives a mean score of 7. Next, we have the stormwater drainage systems in the Botanic Garden. The Botanic Garden in Singapore is the only garden in Singapore that has a huge complex of stormwater drainage system. This is built to prevent the flooding of Orchard Road. And as such, this receives a high score of 9. Next will be the composting of household green and vegetable waste. So when we were in the Botanic Gardens itself, collecting our primary data, we observed there are compost sites at the Jacob Ballas Garden for educational purposes. Also, we look at our secondary data at the NParks website and show that the data does in fact show that there are composting sites all around the garden itself. As such, this receives a mean score of 6. It could be higher, but then because of the fact that the composting is used more for educational, more not as compared to the practical use of it. Next, we'll be looking at the level of hard waste recycling in the urban area. As on the site itself, we observe there are many recycling bins. Other than that, there are recycled goods being sold at the gift shop, and the number of F&B restaurants promoting recycling is quite a few. As such, this receives a mean score of 6, although more recycling can be done, like increasing the number of recycling bins on site and everything. Last but not least is the translation of emissions and waste monitoring into quality improvement strategies. So to be honest, there isn't much primary and secondary data collected for the waste monitoring data for NParks, but we do give you a basic score of 5 because there are attempts of categorizing the recycling of the waste of the on-site itself via the smart recycling bins.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about the flora and fauna criteria. Next. For my data collection, primary data collection techniques include field observations and interviews with the field guide. Secondary data sources include local government websites like NLB and NParks, and earlier research and physical journals from the site of interest, which is the Botanic Garden itself, the Library of Botany and Horticulture specifically. Yep. Okay, these are my particular questions. First question being the resilience of regional ecosystems to past and present development. Some physical past news articles from the Library of Botany and Horticulture talked about the past development of the gardens, and according to sources from the NLB website, the garden only grew bigger and more diverse as time went by. So from a personal garden of Sir Stamford Raffles to a 19-hectare land focused on the cultivation of nutmeg, cocoa, and cloves to today, an 82-hectare botanic garden with more than 36,000 living plant accessions, 6,500 species, and 40 heritage trees. So, but the latest piece of evidence I got from the NLB website dates back to 2014. So, hence I decided on the mean score of 7 lah. Next, second question, I decided to talk about the biodiversity of the region now by comparison with the time of its first major settlement. So according to journals from the same library, the Library of Botany and Horticulture, and based on a short conversation I had with the guide, the garden is ever growing and no biodiversity has been lost thus far, and it has been only increasing lah. So journals don't lie, but there is no way I can 100% verify what the guide is saying, so I decided on a mean score of 7. Okay, next question. I'm looking at the plant species extinction in the botanic gardens across the last 100 years. Okay, 100 years is a pretty long time, but according to the guide, no species in the garden itself, went extinct. And an article from NLB states that new species are being brought in every now and then. So I decided on a mean score of 9. Okay, next, my fourth question, I'm looking at the tree coverage of the botanic gardens. Other than some open fields and water bodies, botanical gardens is actually it's pretty much covered by trees lah. So, and it is quite evident from satellite pictures from Google Maps also. So I give it a mean score of 8. Yep. Next question, I'm talking about the relation of people in the gardens to animals and birds. Yep. So according to the NLB website, we used to have a zoo in the botanical gardens in 1875, but the upkeep was getting too expensive, so the zoo was actually abolished. Yeah, so that brought the score down, and tourists nowadays are not exactly well behaved, so to speak, because they make a lot of noises, and these noises they make might scare the animals a bit. Yep. So I decided on a mean score of 6. Yeah, so my last question, I'm looking at the continuing viability of native species of birds and animals in the garden. According to the guide again, the botanical gardens is a perfect environment for birds and animals to thrive. So other than the paved areas which we walk on, right, the secondary forest is pretty dense lah, so there's a lot of space, plenty of space there for the animals to grow, and the water bodies are quite big, so most of them are actually well out of reach of guests like us. So I decided on a mean score of 9.
Alright, so in conclusion, for my sustainability and emission waste, it has received an average mean score of 6, tabulating the average of all 6 factors, particular questions. So one of the ways to improve this mean score is, first we'll take a look at the carbon emission, which has a score of 4. One way to improve the score of carbon emissions is to reduce parking lots available. When you reduce parking lots available, less people will come in by their private transport, which results in overall lesser CO2 produced by the garden itself. Next, we can increase the use of solar power equipment. So I realized that some of the lights in the botanic garden itself, they are not solar powered, so they can be, which overall reduces the need for gas and other traditional sources of energy, which can produce a lot of CO2. Then next, the second lowest one would be the monitoring and improvement. As I said before, when we were there at the site, there isn't much monitoring and improvement done by NParks in terms of waste and emission. It's more done for the biodiversity itself. So one of the ways to increase the monitoring improvement score is to require cafes to declare their output and waste types. This can help sequester and choose and how to trash these rubbish properly and how to dispose of this rubbish properly. To you, Rihal.
Yep. So my average mean score is 8. And overall pretty good score, but I feel that improvements can be made regarding how people interact with the flora and fauna. I mean, we can't possibly stop the guests from making noise lah, but I'm sure little to no people will follow that also. But maybe some posters around encouraging soft speaking and no shouting would help a little bit. So that might actually improve the average mean score. Yep. Next. So now I'll be talking a bit about the limitations and challenges that we face. So first, there is a scarcity of accessible resources, and we had to do quite a bit of digging. Yeah. Next is the quality of the resources. Some of the articles we looked at from the library is pretty old. They are literally like news articles from the past. So some of them are quite like hard to decipher, and the font and everything, the papers were starting to yellow also. Yeah, and next there was a time constraint as well, because I feel that the guide I saw on my trip was always in a hurry, and we are actually limited by the allocated timing of the whole guide lah. Yeah. Next, there's a lack of quality assurance because some articles were really too old and hard to fact check. Plus, once again, we can't 100% verify what the guy is saying also. Yeah, and then lastly, there's a lack of previous studies and on related topics. Yep.
All right, thank you.